Alrighty, we stopped recording. We started recording. I think, James, you can present without being the host. If you can't, I'll just make you the host again.
Okay.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to NWO Tasting. We are in dark side of the Dram. Enjoying some fantastic whiskeys from Gordon MacPhail. Joining us tonight, we've got Mr. James Bornn, who's going to be taking us through this amazing lineup that we've got in front of us. James, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, this is an honor. I almost like pinch myself that I'm the presenter because I've been very fortunate, working on the import side of whiskey. I've worked with some great brands, especially some brands with like insane history. I worked for White McKay, and of course, you think about the history of Dalmore. But yeah, something about Gordon Macphail feels a little different. I feel, I walk on eggshells a little bit. Even, when we found out that we were going to represent as an agency Gordon Macphail across Canada, I almost wasn't excited. I almost had a pit in my stomach because I thought how the heck can I bring something extra to this story? I mean, there's just so much craziness in terms of their history. And and I'm guessing that I've been working with them for about 1.5 years, but a lot of you can probably add a lot of stories. It seems like everyone I meet, whether it's in the business or tastings or whatever, everyone has a story with Gordon and MacPhail over the years. And it's such an eclectic group of releases that they've done. And there's something for everyone. So I work for Authentic Wine. We represent a bunch of brands, basically Compass Box, Glenlivet, Michter's Bourbon, Wolfburn, and of course Benrinnes, Gordon MacPhail, which definitely brings some interesting things. I know when they came and showed up and introduced the whole company to the brand, they brought a lineup very similar to what we're doing tonight. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, these guys are pulling out all the stops. They're going to blow us away with all these whiskeys. But when you hang around Gordon MacPhail, there seems to be 30 and 40-year-old whiskeys just kind of all over the place for some reason. So yeah, very, very unique collection of whiskeys that they have. So I won't wait too long to get into it. I do have a bit of a presentation, just, to add a few visuals and stimulate some conversation. But usually, when I do these tastings in person, I usually encourage people to talk over me, to interrupt, and that kind of goes here too. If you have a question and you just want to pipe in, that might make Myke angry, but I'm comfortable with it. So feel free. I think at the end of the day, I'm kind of one of you guys. I'm just a whiskey lover that happened to just all of a sudden be selling 80-year-old whiskey one day. So it's kind of a unique privilege. I will say that Richard Urquhart tried to make it tonight because, of course, it actually is within his time. I mean, the guy's a warrior. He's done tastings at 3, 4 a.m. his time for us over the last couple of years. But he's actually away from the business right now doing a class that the company asked him to do. And he got COVID. So he's sick in bed. He's in rough shape. I talked to him this morning and he's very much out of commission. So, but fortunately we got all the whiskeys and off we go. All right, so the first whiskey is the 17-year-old Benrinnes, 1978. Feel free to start that and we'll get into it. I'll see if I can share screen. What you can do, Myke, is right beside the share screen button, I think there's that little tab. It's looks almost like a little arrow just to the right of share screen. And I think you can enable participant sharing there. And that will, we run the risk that someone randomly shares their screen in the group, but who knows, maybe it'll reveal who.
Ricky, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
You should be able to make him a co-host, which makes him be able to share his screen as well.
You can only do that if it's within organization.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, they disabled that ability, unfortunately. Yeah, I know we kind of got screwed on that when we were trading with him. But let's see. Here we go. All right, it looks like I'm in.
Go time.
Let's do it. right, look at that, fancy. Okay, Gordon Macphail. And hopefully some of you have been there, but just a little history. Basically, the company's set up right in Elgin, which I mean has worked out very well for them. They're kind of right in the middle of all the action, as it were. The company dates back to 1895. So they just recently celebrated the 125th anniversary. They're currently into the 4th generation, and we'll get into some details of that. But yeah, like many a whiskey story, the origins go back to grocery. And I love on this form, you see in the middle, like this is you know, when they opened up here, and it says groceries, wine, and spirits. Which, like, for us in Canada, it's amazing. We still are like just figuring this out, like 125 years later. Yeah, it always reminds me of this game my son plays, and the character in the game lives above a store that is titled Guns, Liquor, and Baby Needs. And like, I mean, really, that's what the Scots have been doing since day one. Like, they kind of figured out that these things actually go together. So yeah, this is the guy on the right here is a guy named John Urquhart. So he actually, this is kind of the strange thing, is the Urquhart family owns Gordon Macphail, but they weren't the originators of the actual business. So on the left is a guy named James Gordon, and his partner, who passed away shortly after John Urquhart joined the business, was James Alexander McPhail. So yeah, since Richard Urquhart isn't here, I will call them Jim Gordon and Johnny Mac. If anyone has any ideas that they can spring from that, please share. And yeah, just a strange turn of events. Basically, after about 15 years in the business, John Urquhart, he kind of took over kind of the whiskey side of the business. So he was the one, you know, managing stocks, working with the distilleries. And that became kind of one of the key parts of the business and one of the most profitable parts. Anyways, when John McPhail retired, he took a big stake of the company. And then within a year, James Gordon passed away. So he, like, all of a sudden was in a position, and he took over the business and became the controlling partner in the early 1900s. So yeah, just like that, that's how things got going. And you know, when that happened, then the company's focus really became, you know, sort of more centered around Scotch whiskey, because that was John's focus. So this is the store, and I'm hoping a few of you have been here. It honestly looks exactly the same today. Like, it hasn't changed at all. Like, the sign is the same, the road is the same. Yeah, it's remarkable. Even the store itself, you know, you kind of walk in there, they sell lots of whiskey, but they sell all sorts of other stuff in there too still. So they've, you know, it's remarkable, the continuity in terms of their business model right from day one.
Is that in Glasgow?
This is right in Elgin. So yeah, if you've ever visited Elgin, I often wonder, a lot of people, it's kind of like it's not much of a town, truthfully. You know, there's a little square that kind of has like a little clock tower and a church. And if you walk like about a block south of that, it's kind of just like right off a side road. And I know it's a bit of a mecca for a lot of whiskey lovers. You know, I get emails all the time. People, you know, want to go there and set something up. My own experience coming here the first time was probably about 10 years ago. And I didn't know a lot about Gordon Macphail, but I walked in and it was kind of in the morning, and like the shop was completely empty. And there's kind of like barrels set up with bottles on them all over. And one of them had bottles that were all open. And there was like some glassware. Like, clearly someone had like opened the shop, put out the fresh glassware, but there's no one around. Like, there was no one to till. So the people I was with, there was 4 of us. We just kind of like poked around. We were there for like 20 minutes. And I don't know what came over me, but I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try some of these whiskeys. So we started popping corks, and we had our own tasting. A self-guided tour of a bunch of old whiskeys. And this poor shop, the girl that was running the shop came running out, and she was like freaking out that because we were drinking all these whiskeys. But yeah, anyways, it's a very cool place, and you know, a lot of the whiskeys they sell there are unique to the store, and yeah, definitely worth checking out if you're ever in town and always shoot me a message and I can try to arrange something for you. But of course, originally they stored all the whiskeys on site in the basement of the building, and then the business, a lot of the other parts of the whiskey business were in the offices above. Mike, too, if there is a question that comes up in the chat, I run on a single screen, and so I can't really see it when I'm screen sharing. But yeah, just
no worries. I'm keeping an eye on the chat for you.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so the first whiskey here, I found this picture. So there's no official information even like left of the Centenary Reserve stuff in Gordon Macphail's files. It's kind of just lost a little bit, but I did find this. Someone collected a set of minis of the entire set. So this was something that was put out to celebrate their 100th anniversary. And I mean, this is something that they do commonly. They're even putting out for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee this year. Like they just happen to have 1952 whiskeys, so they're bottling one of them for her Jubilee. But this was a set of 8, and clearly there's bottles still out there. Yeah, I might get Russell to share the story of where this bottle came from, but strangely, in the last week, I've seen 2 people on Instagram post other bottles from the set. If anyone knows Will, the guy that does Lover Malts, he was drinking the same Magdalene like 2 nights ago. So there clearly is bottles still floating around out there. Russell, do you feel comfortable kind of sharing?
There's not much of a backstory. It's I actually got it from Mario. So that's the storyline on that one. Had it for quite some time, and just thought it was a good opportunity to put it in a tasting. Based on the nose and the palate, I did find some ratings and things like that for it. It's much better than I actually anticipated it being. Yeah, that's the backstory. Mario, where did you
Maybe
get?
Mario can tell us how he got it.
Yeah,
right.
Mario already forgot that he got
I
it.
don't remember. I got you this.
Yeah, it was quite some time ago. It might have been 4 years.
I must have been drinking something. But you find these things on the internet and the auction sites or whatnot, probably.
Yeah,
That's where it came from.
yeah.
Yeah, this is another thing that I'll note here. Well, a few things. Someone spelled Benrinnes wrong on this form, which is embarrassing. The winning bid also seems quite reasonable, but this auction was from 2015, so that probably explains that. Yeah, some of the history of Gordon Macphail, because like the real kind of golden age of their business was kind of pre-1970, truthfully. The culture of bottling things at 40% ABV is really strong in the family, and really it's only like in the last 5 to 10 years that they've moved away from that. And in fact, a lot of their core releases they started bottling with non-chill filtering at 46%. And I'm not even kidding you, because it was at the start of the pandemic, because the filtration unit they would bring into their bottling plant and they couldn't come in. So they stopped chill filtering like 2 years ago on anything that wasn't cask strength. And it was not because, I mean, the younger people in the family wanted to discontinue that, I think, for quite some time. But yeah, it's amazing. You'll see, these old Port Ellens and Broras that are all bottled at 40% ABV. But yeah, of course, for long decades of their business, that would have been, the route to market. So yeah, these were all bottled in 1995. So yeah, part of the 100th anniversary. Yeah, any other questions?
Let's get to drinking.
Do it. Okay, so we'll dive right into whiskey number 2 here. So yeah, you can start sipping this, and then I'll kind of explain a little bit of the backstory. So this is Mr. George. I guess because like every single person in the office in the company had the same last name. Everyone just called each other by their first name, except for George. They called Mr. George because he was in charge. So this would have been John's son. And he was the one that kind of took this idea, like this business model they already had, where they had all these relationships with whiskey, or with the distilleries in Speyside in particular. And he kind of took it to the next level and really started marketing and realizing that they kind of had this unique ability to control some of these distilleries as single malt and develop them as brands within, and that kind of became their business model. And eventually, as some of the distilleries started to bottle their own single malts, he kind of created the offshoot of that, which it was called Connoisseurs Choice. So this kind of allowed them to take all their like vast stocks of, you know, almost 200 different distilleries and market them kind of under one umbrella. Now they still withheld some of the ability to bottle some single malts under these, you know, custom brandings that they had created. But they knew they would have to long-term move away from that because, you know, a lot of those distilleries had gone off and started, you know, developing their own brands independently or, you know, required by these big multinational companies. So yeah, so the current incarnation you can see, but I'm sure most of you have seen, you can still, the ones that are right behind the one in the front, I think like you still see on store shelves sometimes in Saskatchewan and Alberta for sure. They're still floating around out there. But yeah, the idea
I've definitely broken a few corks of the Connoisseurs Choice.
Yes.
For sure. At Joe's house, there's video evidence. Actually, I think that Port Ellen on the far right there is, Joe would have to reaffirm that, but.
I know that 1970 Port Ellen, I know there's bottles floating around out there for sure. I know someone actually lives not far from me that has one of those.
I think that's the one I broke cork on, yeah.
Oh no, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
To Canada at some point or another, but yeah, the current incarnation essentially they tweaked it about 3 or 4 years ago, just to like provide more information right on the front. Yeah, tasting notes tend to be pretty solid, as we'll see with the Tormore that we're drinking as whiskey number 2. But yeah, really this is their place to play. So historically, a lot of them were bottled at like various different strengths. Like you'd see things originally mostly at 40%, but then there'd be like a Connoisseur's Choice cask strength range. But now pretty much like 95% of what they bottle here is cask strength under Connoisseur's Choice. And you might get these occasional one-offs, especially like wine finishes and stuff. Like some of you may have seen like the lead jig or Cali or Hermitage finish. Those will often be at 45 or 46%, but yeah, everything's like non-chill filtered, non-colored. But yeah, so this is the specific one. And yeah, believe it or not, the person who selected this cask is on the call. So I'll pass it off to Ricardo and you can maybe explain just briefly like how this process worked and yeah, how this ended up in Canada.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks so much, James.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but I work for Calgary Co-op as the spirits category manager in cannabis. So this one in particular, I was able to get a couple of different vials, one of them being the Tormore and another one was an Old Pulteney. Price on this is, for my opinion, is extremely good. We retail this. We still have some available in our stores for $299.99. But like James was saying on this, like the note that they have for that guava and like kind of pineapple or like super tropical, that's exactly what I get on this. The process was, you get a couple vials of certain things, and then you have a window of time to choose which one you want. You kind of slightly negotiate on price. Of course, it's really hard with James Bornn to negotiate on price, but
it's not my money.
So this one in particular, we actually split the cask with another co-op. So not a Calgary co-op, but an island co-op, just because of the price point. It being a retail of $300, I was a little bit leery, knowing that the juice was damn well delicious, but just being able to move it, turn the stock and get some new interesting, exciting products in. But right after I got the first bottle and I cracked it, I knew I made a mistake. I should have kept the whole cask for myself, or for co-op, I should say, considering it's not a very large cask, right? 143 bottles.
Yeah,
So
it's
small.
But yeah, all these different co-ops in Canada. So actually, by the time this has made it to market, it's actually in 5 different co-ops in Western Canada. So yeah, strangely, all the co-ops have strong whiskey programs. So yeah, like the one in Vancouver, the Otter Co-op has probably quickly becoming like the destination for whiskey in the mainland. And then the Mid Island in Nanaimo, their buyer is, not unlike you, Ricardo, like, he's a passionate whiskey guy himself. And yeah, I mean, suddenly there's co-op in Saskatchewan too that, you don't have to go to the government stores anymore to get good whiskey. And so, this is like right up their alley. But yeah, just if anyone's ever curious, like how this process goes, it's a lot of politicking. So Gordon Macphail this year, for example, I was just sent a list of 6 single casks. So I get all this kind of information. It's not bottled yet. I just know when it's been filled. So there's stuff of various ages. And then I kind of have a document where I keep track of people that have requested. So, even some of those are like some of the clubs in Western Canada, but, retailers like Ricardo or, BC liquor stores, you can imagine Andrew Ferguson's on that list. And so then the politicking starts. So what I usually try to do is if there's a cask on there that's just like an absolute home run, like for instance, this year on the list, there was a Ledgig 17-year-old from refilled bourbon. And like I cracked it and tried a little bit, and like it's a unicorn. It's an unbelievable Ledgig cask, like super smoky, lots of tropical fruit. What would happen is, let's say I gave that to one retailer. I get a lot of angry messages from others being like, I want the Ledgig 17-year-old. So usually those ones I bottle and I'll put Canada exclusive on the little bar, and I usually try to split it around and make sure everyone has kind of a fair shot. And that's a good way too for these like really awesome casks that come in for maybe people that like don't know much about Gordon Macphail. It gives them a bit of an access point. So that's kind of been what I've generally done. And then you kind of have the second tier casks, which are kind of the ones that are more interesting. So like a 1998 Tormore. And again, like I knows this and I knew right away because it was just so bold that someone was going to be into this cask for sure. So I tried to, split up the cask, maybe like 2 samples per person, and they get mailed out. And usually I just try to go in order of the request. And then, usually people will pick one, and then there's always a little bit of sloppy seconds and leftovers, but it's tough to say who's going to love which one. So, but it's kind of fun because the lists are crazy. Like, this year's list has a Royal Brackla, and it has an Altmore, and it has a Glen Scotia, and it has like a 25-year-old Balblair, like just that has like 400 bottles in it. So it's all over the map. It's all over the map. But yeah, so that's how this got here. Yeah, and if anyone's familiar with Tormore, this tropical fruit note, especially like when it's matured in old American oak, is definitely a common thread for Tormores, even like when they're youthful. Like Gordon Macphail has something called the Discovery Range that's like kind of under 15-year-old Tormore, and like it's quite tropical too. So there's clearly a bit of a thread there. All right.
Yeah, we're getting some some interesting notes in the chat here. Joss, the chocolate milk on the nose, that's cool. But yeah, a lot of notes about the tropical fruits. That's got quite the palate to it.
Yeah, it really does. And I was going to say this one, I've noticed that too. Ricardo, I'm sure you've noticed too. Like this one takes water really well. Like to me, like the flavors like expand and even get creamier and more tropical with water. It doesn't need it though. It drinks well neat too.
I found some water opened up the fruitiness, and also the mouthfeel was a little better with a little bit of water, and it got really creamy and viscous. It was nice.
Yeah. Some of that, like there's a little bit of raw wood I find from the first fill bourbon, and the water like seems to dissipate like that part, like which to me is maybe my least favorite part of the whiskey. So you add water and that part goes away, at least for me. But yeah, cool pick, Ricardo. I'm very thankful to have this because, sometimes, in my position, I'm doing like this educational stuff, and people don't always, if you tell them that whiskey smells like tropical fruit or like Five Alive, Like that makes no sense to them. But this whiskey, like this illustrates it pretty good.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this too is that, you know, like a lot of these cool whiskeys are, the nose is never exactly the same as the palate. Like the nose on this, I feel is a little bit more muted, but on the palate, you're like, for me, I keep telling everyone, this is like, you know, the Jif commercial where every time he takes a bite and he's like, oh my God, he's like stunned. This is literally every time I pour this, I do the same thing. Now it sounds like I'm probably just trying to sell the product, but we don't have a whole lot left. I know there was a comment in the chat. There isn't a lot left. World of Whiskey does have some, and we do work with, I think it's Pure Later. There's a gentleman that has a business really close by. So if you reach out to the store to say, hey, like I'm looking if you're able to ship this, they'll provide you with the gentleman's name. He packages, he ships it and everything. And he's very reasonable priced. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much, James.
Yeah, no, this is fun. No, I love this process of like going through and having this attachment. I mean, it's, yeah, I think especially too, like with the whole Gordon Macphail story, like there's, you know, just this idea that, you know, people are going through and pulling out these casks. And I think the casks that are pulled out, so like they do a blind assessment in the lab and they score them. So obviously, like they have to hit a certain threshold to make it into this program. But often what they do is they're looking, the ones that go to like individual markets like this, like they definitely have a conversation of like, okay, this one's kind of like unique, it's a little different, like the Canadians will be into this, which I think like full disclosure, like I told them, like, look, if you have any like weird legend, like please offer it to us. And then that 17 like popped up. So it's kind of cool to see. And yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, those of you that follow Myke out of Ottawa, Myke Breesbaugh, like, you know, they pulled a really wacky cask for him. It's not always possible. I mean, yeah, if you're going to ask for like a full cask of Macallan, of which they have a lot, they probably aren't going to cough one of those up. But yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff that they thought. All right. Okay, yeah, little discussion about the family here. You can start on whiskey 3 after your palate's taken that tropical fruit 5 Alive storm. So yeah, this is the 3rd generation. So you know, these are the kids of George Urquhart, and yeah, a lot of you may know Richard, who's come a lot into the market over the years. So his dad David is on the far left. He actually tragically passed away almost 10 years ago. But the truth is that this generation of family really isn't that involved with the business as much anymore. They've kind of stepped back, and which is kind of cool. And you know, you may have noticed that Gordon Macphail, like there's definitely been a few changes in the last kind of 5 years or so. I mean, you've seen like Ben Romick, finally they, you know, are releasing stuff at 46%. The Connoisseurs Choice range is pretty much all cask strength now. You know, they bumped up the distillery label series up to 46% non-chill filtered, and you know, I think you kind of see some of these effects of having, you know, most people running the show now are kind of in their late 30s and early 40s, and you know, that's definitely had an effect. And it seems like they're, you know, curating this collection really well. And I think kind of their stamp on the business now is they're actually building a second distillery from scratch called the Cairn, and that's opening up later this year, just like way in the south of Speyside near the Cairngorms Park. So yeah, Richard, who you'll definitely see in Canada from time to time, he's in the bottom middle, and his twin brother on the left does all the stock management. So he's the one that picks these casks. Yeah, so here's the store today. As you can see, like where that picture was taken on the left before, like still looks exactly the same. And I think actually they're just renovating the upper floors right now. They're turning it into like a whole new visitor experience, and they've got all sorts of crazy plans. So yeah, I love this picture. This is just sort of down the street in Elgin, where they actually have like their official storage facilities. It looks like this picture is staged with like all these old casks and stuff. But like you could go like anywhere in their warehouses, and this is the kind of cross section you'd see. Like this kind of stuff is just lying around all over the place. Like it's just insane. like different distilleries, different ages, and yeah, thankfully Stuart is keeping his eye on the button of what's going on. But I think currently they're at about 170 distilleries, like actively aging. I know I was bugging Richard to try to tell us which of the newer distilleries, so distilleries that are less than 10 years old, which ones are letting them fill and which ones are not. And they're still kind of sworn to secrecy on that until they release things. But he did say that some of the distilleries that have opened like understand the role Gordon Macphail plays over long term and were like really eager for Gordon Macphail to fill. And some basically like said like there is no chance that we're giving you any of our liquid. So you know, it's interesting to see like how this dynamic works, because you know Gordon Macphail does things differently. They don't buy mature casks from other companies. They don't ever do that. They actually fill the casks, and they're their casks. So they would go into most distilleries once or twice a year with like a truck full of wood, and you know, fill their cask. And usually they mature on site, so they'll actually rent space as part of the agreement. And I know Richard told me this story once of, you know, one of these tastings where usually around like 10, 15 years, they often will pull it out and bring it into their own warehouses in Elgin for the remainder of the maturation. A lot of the reason for that is there's kind of this history of their casks being mistreated, sometimes when they're old. Often there was, you know, kind of this history of the oldest casks that would be left in the distillery would be the Gordon Macphail casks. So like the actual distillery stock was like over here, and then you had all these like amazing old like 30 and 40-year-old casks from Gordon Macphail sitting in this parcel. So I think it caused some problems. So they try to avoid that, I think, when they can. But yeah, pretty remarkable system they've got set up. So yeah, whiskey number 3 is from a closed distillery called Inverleven. And yeah, this really interesting history. Now, you know, I think a key part of Inverleven today is, I'm going to guess that most people on this call, even though Inverleven closed in 91, most people on this call have probably drank whiskey from the Inverleven stills in the last year. Does anyone know where that has ended up? I'm sure someone's on top of their game.
I'm going to go with Inver 12 for 1200, please.
No,
Final answer.
Okay, so yeah, so I'll just go through the whole story of Inverleven. Thomas Fox is a great guess. I mean, look, there's got to be lots of Inverleven casks still floating around out there. I'm sure Gordon Macphail has tons. But yeah, so the distillery was built in the 30s, but it was part of the Dumbarton grain distillery. But they threw these 2 stills in there to make malt whiskey. And then I don't think they were used necessarily all the time. But then they actually added a 3rd still, a Lomond still, in the early 50s. And so they were making whiskey as well from that. And I forget what that stuff is called. It has a different name. Anyways, they got acquired and, you know, essentially shut down in 1991 because they were redundant. The company that owned the Dumbarton distillery also owned Strathclyde, which was a newer, better distillery. So anyways, they dumped this. So a lot of the equipment and everything just kind of was left to rot for like 10 years, 10, 15 years. And lo and behold, when Bruichladdich got going, kind of in the early 2000s, I think that Mark Rainier and co were quite aware that the Inverleven stills were hanging around, and they cut a deal for them. And the idea was they were going to bring them over and reopen them as the Port Charlotte distillery. So that was the plan. So the Lomond still actually is still on site at Bruichladdich, and that's where they make the gin that they make. The Bonus gin comes out of that still. And yeah, I remember I did briefly work for Bruichladdich, and some of the people that told me the stories of how they brought these stills from Glasgow across the water to Islay. Apparently it was like on a barge, and it almost capsized. think there's actually some Bruichladdich special editions that like commemorate this event. But yeah, anyways, these Inverleven stills, they didn't in time, yeah, right. They didn't actually get a chance to install them in Port Charlotte because they sold the distillery to Remy, and Remy was like, "Yeah, we're not building another distillery." So the Inverleven stills like sat out in the rain, and I'm sure a lot of you probably saw them or saw pictures of them. They just kind of were like bumming around for like years and years and years. I think both of them were actually left outside. So yeah, anyways, of course, the connection there is Mark Rainier, who now is making whiskey at Waterford. So he made a phone call. So Waterford is using Inverleven stills. So this would have been distilled from the same stills as Waterford. It's like bizarre how it's gone around.
Small little world over in Scotland.
Yeah, right. Like distillery equipment is, yeah, Scots don't waste things, I guess. Yeah, it seems like there's some couple of good notes in here.
Nose on this is interesting. Like initially with some water got really, really sweet, really like a lot of confectioner stuff in there. But with a little time, there's some more interesting herbal stuff coming out. Some heather.
Yeah, what I love about this is even though there is like you see that coconut note for the nose and that chocolate, which is like to me more of a wood-based note, it doesn't feel wood dominant at all. It feels very, very well balanced between the malt and the wood. So this bottle, I think we just pulled off shelf. This probably was the last one. I think I was only offered 6 bottles of this. So, but I think both of them ended up in Edmonton at Malts and Grains. I'm fairly certain.
Yeah.
And that palette is just an orchard in a glass. Apples, pears, Macintosh toffee. I think this is my first Inverleven, not going to be the last. This is good.
Yeah, it's something I remember hearing, you know, at a tasting with closed distilleries was, you know, this idea that a lot of closed distilleries were closed for a reason. And I mean, obviously, like things like Bornn kind of would be against that idea, but you know, certainly something like Inverleven, you know, I know for a fact that, you know, the blenders at Chivas like specifically didn't love it, but you know, I see this with Imperial now too, which also kind of didn't have a great reputation. Seems like there's certain distilleries that like come into their own like past age 30 or past age 25 in this case.
And there are just some exceptional IB Imperials out there right now.
Totally.
Your distillery labels Imperial is fantastic.
Yeah, if you can find one, there's a few of them kicking around out there. The actually, I might have one of you somewhere. Yeah, this is what they look like.
Yeah. Yeah, that is just such a great bottle. Ricky, you got any of those left?
Text me tomorrow during the day. I can double check. I want to say potentially.
I feel like I remember seeing it on your website not too long ago.
I think I might have gotten my bottle from Co-op actually. I think there might be some still floating around out there. Yeah, so the grounds where Dumbarton used to be is now, I think, the BBC studios in Scotland. So if you you know, I'm always curious, and I went and looked at the like the Google images of where it is, and like it still totally looks like a distillery from the air. But then from ground level, it looks like it's totally been renovated and modernized. You know, you wouldn't know that it was a distillery complex. But just down the street, Chivas still owns like enormous tracts of land where they do most of the maturation for their distilleries, because of course, you know, the majority doesn't get matured on site. A lot of it's trucked out, and then they just mature it, you know, in these like enormous warehouse complexes. And Chivas has like 3 or 4 of those around Scotland, just, you know, like warehouse upon warehouse. I don't know how they manage that, but somehow. Okay. Yeah, Flint, that's interesting.
I don't know if I like that Inverleven more than the Tormore or not. It's going to be a tough one. Both exceptional whiskeys, both so different.
Yeah, it's fun. They're kind of, in a way, these 2 whiskeys kind of, to me, are like in a similar category, but you know, have gone in 2 very different directions, that's for sure. All right, well, show must go on. Okay, so yeah, going into whiskey number 4. So now we're going to do 2 back-to-back 40-year-old Glenlivets. And the reason they brag about their casks, of course, is, you know, again, as we mentioned, Gordon Macphail has this unique thing where they, you know, are controlling all their own wood, even amongst the different distilleries. So they're not kind of tied into certain distilleries' wood programs. So, you know, they're pretty blunt that they like to experiment even within their own selection, which is why you see like all sorts of, you know, American oak aged Dalmores, or, you know, they're always playing. They're always trying to do something different. And yeah, Sherry in particular, they've got this long-standing relationship with Williams and Humboldt, which, you know, they still get sherry casks from them to this day, which allows them to, you know, have a little bit more control and still source this kind of more of an old school style of sherry butt. And so you'll see that pretty commonly, you know, mostly Spanish oak, not as much American oak. It's still a percentage of what they fill. Of course, historically, you know, the really old casks are those American oak transport casks, but they're still making transport casks now that they're filling casks in, which are the ones that have those thicker staves that, you know, have kind of less interaction over time. But yeah, kind of the key point is that because they were filling their own casks, and for many years, Gordon Macphail was the source of a lot of like distilleries now that are famous. So, you know, for many years, if you wanted a Macallan or a Glenlivet or a Mortlock, like you had to go to Gordon Macphail to get it. And so because of that, you know, like you saw in the Imperial, Gordon Macphail was controlling the brandy. And they have kind of a bit of a grandfather deal in place. So yeah, you can kind of see here, thankfully, you know, one of the changes with this new generation is that they've dramatically cut down on the amount of ranges. So apparently when this transition happened, they had 16 official ranges of whiskeys. And I mean, we've all seen, you know, the various different bottlings and stuff that are still floating around up there, but they tried to tighten that down. So yeah, so the distillery labels, the 1 second from the left, is kind of where we're at now, where, you know, the brands that they still have the rights to do this for, you know, they do continue to do it to this day. You know, and then they're obviously looking to kind of create some continuity, batch to batch, vintage to vintage. And now those ones are all 46%. But yeah, again, you know, with Glenlivet, historically, this would have been the only type of Glenlivet bottle you could have gotten was through Gordon Macphail. So slowly but surely, Gordon Macphail's getting cut off on a lot of this stuff. I know recently they were notified no more Strathisla. So they always joke that there's this call they get where, you know, the companies now decide like, we're not gonna share the love with Gordon Macphail anymore, and they get cut off. So I don't believe they're filling Glenlivet anymore. They're not filling Strathisle, of course. They haven't been filling McAllen or Highland Park for many years. But, you know, still have tons in the warehouse. And there's definitely an attitude in the family, like it's just a matter of time. And, you know, they'll get the phone call again to fill. I mean, I don't know if McAllen will be able to sell 20 million liters a year forever. You know, eventually they might come crawling back. Yeah, in fact, I very much remember, you know, a lot of you remember Jay Wheelock. Like I remember being in one of his McAllen seminars years ago. And I distinctly remember him saying that Gordon Macphail kept McAllen alive in the 50s. Like there was a period of time where they were under hardship. And Gordon Macphail was still selling lots of McAllen and buying lots of new make McAllen. And that was what was like the difference of keeping the doors open or not for a time. So I don't know, you know, I can't verify that, but it gives a sense at least of like the type of business they were doing. And, you know, I think for decades, like people thought Gordon Macphail was crazy because they could have sold the whiskey for blends and made more money, but they just kind of believed in this program, and they believed in single malts. And especially like Mr. George, like that was just his thing. So he persisted. All right. Jeez. Yeah, I love the official tasting note where they drop the first word is fragrant. Seems a little inadequate in this case. I'm actually curious, Russell, I might get you to cut in again. If you know how much this bottle sold for 8 years ago when it was released.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I wouldn't know what it sold for 8 years ago.
I can tell you, I got this bottle for Russell.
Yeah.
It was about $750 6 years back, and I got it at the same price.
Wow.
Yeah. My thing is that I have tried this before, and I wish everyone had tried this before they tried the cast strength Tormore. Because once you have the cast strength, then the finish becomes short on the 43%.
Yeah, it's interesting, Rohit. When I admit I set the lineup, and my first draft of the lineup, I had this at number 2. And I moved it here because I just thought in this group that we had such experienced tasters that people would be comfortable with that and know how to cut through that. But you're right, it does. That Tormore is a bit of a beast.
Yeah.
I wanted the opportunity too to taste the 2 40-year-old Glenlivets kind of side by side. So, I mean, this is a tricky thing when you're putting together. To be honest, it's a problem I often have when I'm doing Gordon Macphail lineups is there isn't like a perfect lineup, you know, a perfect way to do it. You're often making a compromise.
Yeah, this Glenlivet never came to Canada. This was only sold in US for, I think, 600 plus tax, which works out to about 800 Canadian or something. I don't know what would be costing today if they released a Glenlivet like this at 43%.
Yeah, I think this might have been some of the very last Glenlivet distillery label that they released, because of course they're not allowed to anymore, as far as I understand. Yeah, it's a good question. I would imagine. Okay, so the Benrinnes 40 that they just released is about 1,800 pounds. So this would probably be in that range. So like about 3,000, 3,500. That's where I would guess.
I found that the Tormore and the Inverleven were both powerful whiskeys, with kind of a limited flavor profile. This one is just so balanced. It's much more complex, and everything is just so harmonious in the glass.
Yeah, truthfully, like when I think of Gordon Macphail whiskey, like I think about whiskeys like this and this kind of character.
James, do you know if when they released this Glenlivet 40, if that's the same time they released that 21-year-old Glenlivet, the 43% as well? The same kind of label?
I think so. And I know, yeah, I went through lots of that 21-year-old. We got lots of it in BC too. And I'm trying to think like how much it cost. I think it was like $150.
Yeah, it was like 130 on the shelf over here, which was like
Yeah.
21-year-old Glenlivet for 130 bucks.
Yeah, and that was you know, not as, you know, it definitely wasn't as mature as this, but it had a lot of similarities for sure.
I think that was one of the few bottles that I actually consumed within a month. I usually don't like doing that, but that bottle was like, I just kept going to it because it has kind of like, it wasn't as complex, didn't have the same kind of finish, but it was like super harmonious, super easy drinking, changing as you drink it, just like this one. This is a great product. Thanks for sharing, Rohit.
Yeah, that's very generous.
Yeah.
Working with the Gordon Macphail team to get this information, like I tried to squeeze more information about this. So it says, you know, refill American hogshead. Like, is it one hogshead? Was it multiple? A lot of that information kind of basically they don't have a ton of information of older releases. They really don't. You have to rely on the internet a little bit more. It always makes me feel good to know though that they get confused too about all the releases they do. I think they try their best to like avoid, you know, like releasing like 6 2004 Glenlivets in the same year. Like they do try to at least create some. And for me too, like what I buy, I try to avoid, like, you know, if I had a 1998 Highland Park last year, I won't buy another 98 Highland Park this year. It gets like the people I work with on the clerical side, like they probably have nightmares that they just get Gordon Macphail emails because it's confusing. It definitely gets confusing. Yeah, I get a print off every week of all the products that we sell, and it's about 6 pages. And of the 6 pages, a full page and a half is Gordon and Macphail stuff. Oh God, could smell that forever. All right. So for comparison's sake, now we're going to put it right next to the 1978 private collection. So you can see that they changed the packaging of some of the premium stuff here a little bit. Actually, something I learned in the last couple of weeks is the packaging on this stuff is a lot of it is actually made in the Ukraine, of all places. So they've got all sorts of problems, as you might imagine, but all these labels and capsules and these boxes are all made in the Ukraine. The warehouse where the materials are stored and kept was destroyed last week. So they actually let us know that they're not gonna be able to bottle any private collection for the foreseeable future because of this, as they figure out what the next steps are for them. But kind of crazy that I just found that out this morning, and it was like, oh, it's the first I've, you know, other than just the news, seen and the gas pump, I guess, seen a real effect there.
Yeah, I wish all the distilleries can get together, and everybody who makes whiskey, they should all ditch the boxes. There's no need for boxes.
Yeah, it's a good comment, and it's interesting to hear from them. You know, it's not the North American market that wants boxes. You know, I think that here we're more than happy. You know, there's probably exceptions to that, but there's still very much some important markets for which the box is a really big deal. But it does seem like the tide is changing. I know a lot of you probably have seen some of these. Like a lot of the compass box packaging has become like very, like it's like a white box. You can kind of probably guess what's going on. They actually like eliminated the boxes for all like the inexpensive whiskeys completely. And really they're just trying to like train people that, you know, crazy boxes, well, can be an interesting marketing tool, just aren't necessary. I definitely think that's something you're going to see more and more going forward. Plus, like a lot of these companies are trying to hit, you know, they're trying to get like sustainability certifications and all this kind of stuff, and like carbon neutral status, and the packaging is like a big red X on those types of things that the Scotch business is going to have to deal with.
Well, it's interesting. Last year, Brooke Laddie introduced a program for purchases directly from their website where you had to specifically request a tin.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would ship you the bottle without. And they've actually reduced moving tins, I think, by 60% now.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a lot of weight too.
It is. It's a lot of weight. It's a lot of volume. That played a part in them being rated as a B Corp. So they're pretty happy about that.
Yeah, no, I believe it.
I think the funniest joke this year is sustainability, push from Macallan. So they introduced this harmony using the coca waste and all that stuff, and they play that marketing tool to sell harmony. And within next month, they release this A Night on Earth, which comes in 2 boxes. So the trees they avoided to cut for harmony, they cut for a night on Earth.
It all evens out, doesn't it, Rohit?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting conversations that happen in that regard. I know that when Gordon Macphail was releasing the 80-year-old too, I mean, they worked with an architect that's known for like innovation in that type of space, like sustainability and, you know, using less waste in construction and all that kind of stuff, you know. And but at the same time, you're like releasing the oldest whiskey that's ever been bottled. You know, how do you compromise on those two things?
Yeah. Well, at that price, it's different.
Yes. Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see, like, because I think too, like, consumers can smell the stink, you know, when you fake this stuff. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how companies, you know, get away with this. So, and I'm also curious because I'm curious where this bottle came from, because I know that the 5 3-packs that came into Canada, they were supposed to go to the duty-free airport in Vancouver, all 15 bottles. And of course, I have one of them here, but it's not. This was one that I think Russ tried to sneak into his bags a few months ago, that we used to promote the release of the 80-year-old. But clearly, some must have made its way to Alberta. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has insight of where this bottle came from.
Russ ain't talking.
Yeah, the Otter Co-op still sells it in British Columbia. They have what I assume is the last bottles that are available for sale, which is where I got mine from. But yeah, I think it's about 2,500, 2,700 ish.
It's excellent. It's a very good looking bottle for sure.
Man, it smells good.
Yeah, this I chose this whiskey for we were doing like a food pairing, and I felt like I always get nervous pairing 40-year-old whiskeys with food, but I mean this cask definitely has a bit of an assertive character to it. I mean, it feels to me like it's actually not fully mature, but I'm curious on your feedback.
Out of all the whiskeys, this has the longest legs.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
this
think
has got some pop.
yeah, one of the notes in the tasting note is that chili. And to me, like when you see chili in a tasting note, like what I'm looking for is not necessarily the flavored chili, but like that effect. And this does kind of definitely have that. Like the spice doesn't feel like pepper; it feels specifically more like a hot pepper.
Yeah, it's got heat. It really gets into the sides of your tongue, almost a numbing effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it also is completely different from the last whiskey.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, okay, yeah, we've got two 40-year-old Glenlivets, but you couldn't have two whiskeys further apart.
No, I would love to see the blind taster that could identify these as the same distillery.
Interesting that a 40-year-old whiskey could have an ABV that high as
Yeah.
well. The Angels clearly weren't particularly interested in this cask.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's something that a common thread. It seems like, I mean, it seems like a lot of kind of silly hype of Gordon Macphail and their cask quality, but consistently I see that what we're getting offered and what they're bottling, it does. Usually the outturns seem pretty high, relatively speaking, for age, and the ABVs always seem kind of healthy. In fact, that's it's very strange because this cask that we pulled for Myke Brisebois, and again, he was looking for something specific, and they did actually, they were able to get it, but it was a sherry hogshead, and it only had like 50 bottles left in it, and the ABV, even for a 12-year-old cask had like dipped to 52%, which seemed a little bit low. Like normally, across a range of casks, you would kind of expect some of those casks to pop out. But, at least the list that I'm getting from G&M, like it's very rare that you see something like that. It seems like all of these whiskeys are on this like really long trajectory. And, even stuff that's bottled like at 40 years old seems like it's still, might have in another timeline seen, another decade or two. Okay. All right. Well, now we've we've done our damage with. Okay, so this is not what we're drinking next. So yeah, you probably saw that slide a few slides ago. Let's see. I'll go back and review that, where they showed like the range of whiskeys that they do. So yeah, I remember being so excited when they told us, that we were getting Gordon Macphail, and they showed us this slide, because I thought, man, I cannot have like 24 different types of Gordon Macphails to sell in the market. So they told us that everything was going to be in this packaging, in this lineup. And almost immediately I got an email with one of these bottles on it. And I was like, well, good job, guys. You abandoned that about 30 seconds into the plan. But these archives are very unique. They're one-offs. And the reason for them is that there was an extended period at the start of the pandemic where Gordon Macphail was not able to bottle just about anything that in their lineup. But they had some of this older glass from previous editions that they had in storage. So what they decided to do was they had this classification where they sometimes find casks that are like fully mature, but don't quite fit their private collection. Like they don't quite fit going into this. Let's just say that, or into those crazier older private collection bottles. So I think sometimes they sell those casks. Anyways, they decided to bottle a bunch of them. And so we took 3 of them, and you can see like the outturn of these casks is tiny sometimes. And the price they gave us 60% off normal cost, like for the normal formula. They cut 60% of the price off. So like this 1979 Glenlivet was, yeah, I think it was selling for like $1,500 in Alberta. And then there was a 67 Linkwood, which sold for, I think, kind of 4,500 to 5,000. And then there was a 62 Glen Grant that was about the same price. So yeah, again, it was one-off, but apparently there was one international market that didn't take one of their casks and never ordered it, never took it. So all of a sudden one day, Richard told me, he's like, yeah, do you guys want another archive? And I was like, well, tell me more. So yeah, they found this Glenburgie, 1967. And it's actually very different because like these older ones that we got, like you can kind of see in the color, like the Linkwood and the Glen Grant, even though they look fairly dark in the picture, like they're actually even much, much, much darker than it looks. Like here's a cask sample of Glen Grant. I'm like, this is a tiny vial and it's crazy. Like I think for some people, this would almost be like too much sherry. If some of you have tried them, you'll know what I mean. Yeah, I'd never really had experience with anything like that before that, you know, almost tastes a little bit more like sherry than actual whiskey, but I know there's some people out there.
56 years in a first fill?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, if your idea of a sherry bomb is like, you know, if you got some on your skin, you'd actually have like a permanent stain for a week and a half. Like this is your jam. But yeah, so that was kind of the story. But anyways, I kind of got mad at Richard because this Glenburgie is from refill sherry, and truthfully, to me, this tastes more like it could have fit in their regular private collection range. But the outturn was so small. So, you know, it's tricky for them. There's only 50 bottles in this cask. In fact, they didn't even make up one of these sheets for me with this Glenburgie, but you can see on the back here, you know what I'm going to do? Stop sharing. You can probably see on the back, like all the information is on here. So there's only 50 bottles in a refill sherry hogshead. So that's a lot. It's 48%. Did I freeze?
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, so the tasting note here is color light mahogany, nose stewed raisin, and autumnal spice complement rich fruitcake, sweet and smooth with black currants, honey, toasted almonds, and mature oak. A long finish of mixed nuts. Okay.
So with 50 bottles out of this cask, was this like a butt, a hogshead, like
yeah, it was a
cask, a 30-second cask? Like,
well, I think probably it was an American oak hogshead sherry cask. So you can figure out like there's 8 cases of 6 that they have shipped us that are here in like I think June, and then the 2 extra bottles he shoved them in his luggage when he came out in November. So he's like, yeah, there was 2 extra casks that didn't fit in the case. So first of all, this was part of the deal, is because of the weird bottles they used, they had to package it in 6-packs. So they're packaging like $4,000 whiskeys in a 6-pack of like just very basic cardboard. But the justification was that they're giving this great discount on it. So then that made sense. So I know I feel bad. You know, some of the retailers that have carried this stuff have told me some horror stories of people coming in and being like, is that really like a 1962? Because I mean, it kind of looks like a $20 bottle.
It is, James. It's an underwhelming looking whiskey.
Oh, completely.
I just need to take a moment and just thank you for all you've done for this tasting. This tasting would have been unaffordable for many of us.
Me too.
And I want to thank you for everything you did for this. So
yeah, you're welcome.
To James, he made this happen. I really, really appreciate it. So
yeah, I knew that you guys would actually appreciate this whiskey.
Yeah, We do.
I think there's a lot of people out
Indeed,
there
we do.
that I think there's a lot of people there that would taste this 67 Glenburgie and kind of not get it. And not understand that it's actually like pretty well priced for what it is, especially in the current context.
It's actually one of my favorite things to do is actually show this bottle and say, hey, look, guess how much this it costs. You know, like even in comparison to the 40-year Glenlivet and the fancy swanky wood box, it's underwhelming, but it's an overachiever for sure. What a beautiful dram to share with us. So
yeah, no, you're welcome. Yeah, so if this had gone into like the regular range, you know, as a 1967 Glenburgie, it probably would be about 12 or 13,000 a bottle. But because the cask was leaky, yeah, they cut that price right down. So it'll probably retail for like 4,500 to 5,000 here.
I struggled to even find any sort of reference to this bottle whatsoever.
Yeah, my guess is that once someone snags some in our market, I mean, it'll end up on Whiskey Base. I'm sure someone will figure out a way to post a note on there. But
No, Serge will do a review, and then people will go crazy.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing that struck me about this is where some of the older archives are just like were those insane cherry bombs, like the Glen Grant 62. Like this one has like a really distinct personality. Like I wouldn't just say like, oh yeah, this is just like an old cherry bomb. Like it has like very, very distinctive aromas and flavors. It's very vital. Yeah, that's kind of a character of these old G&M whiskeys. They very, very rarely taste tired.
It's interesting. The fruit is there for sure, but there's this mustiness on the palate. Like old leather, worn leather. Maybe it's been left out in the rain a little bit.
Changed since you moved to Hamilton, Mike.
Yeah, I go to tax shops a lot now.
Yeah, often when I taste whiskeys like this, I feel like unless you were tasting really old whiskey all the time, it's hard to even put this in context.
Well, Joss will help me out on this one. I remember one of the first tastings I went to with the Dram Society, which is the group that Joss runs in Toronto and in Montreal. I tried a very, very, very old whiskey. I don't even remember what it was, Joss. That 37-year-old. Do you remember what that was?
Oh, it was a it's escaping me right now, but it was a banana in a bottle, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was god awful. It's one of the worst whiskeys I've ever tasted. It. Yeah, I forget. Maybe it was a Glen Grant or something.
You'll come to me.
Yeah, it was a Connoisseurs. I remember that. It was 37 years old. And I went in expecting the moon and the stars, and it was just, it tasted like banana runs. That was it. It wasn't even real banana. It was fake banana candy. And that was the one single tasting note. This is not that.
No, it's really not. The note that I get on this other one that's like the really crazy dark cherry.
The Glen Grant?
The Glen Grant 62. Like to me, it smells very much like candle wax, and it smells like Coke bottle candies, which on those like really, really old cherry whiskeys, I always get that note. That like it's like ginger candy, right?
So what time is it now? It's 20 after 9. I poured this. I poured all of my samples at about 7:30. This is still changing. Every time I nose it, there's something new.
Well, one thing I'll say is the bottle I have was opened in November, and it still tastes fresh as the daisy, but it's changed a lot. And I was blown away. The neck pour was spectacular, but it's still like, it's slowly unraveling. Yeah, I did a tasting with Stephen Rankin, who is like the Urquhart's cousin. So he's one of their directors. And someone asked him what they're hoping to achieve with their new distillery, the Cairn, that's opening in the fall. And he had this great comment. He said, we're trying to create a distillery that, is good in different types of wood. So like, shines equally in American oak as in a sherry cask, as in the next bourbon barrel, but drinks well when it's like 10 years old, or drinks well when it's like 50, 60 years old. And the distilleries he referenced that he felt that checked all those boxes were Linkwood and Glenburgie. Those were the two that he mentioned, and Mortlock. I thought that was pretty interesting. That's what I've got to say, guys. Now's the fun part.
Andre, this is where you take over, my friend.
Oh yeah.
The floor is yours. But before that, James, thanks for everything you've done. Thanks for inviting me out to Vancouver, making whiskey dreams come true. And thanks for providing us with wonderful tasting like this.
So, yeah, you're welcome.
We really appreciate it. So
yeah, no, you've been very generous to me, and I know when I had that ability to invite people to taste the oldest whiskey ever bottled, and my first list had like 120 people on it, and I could invite like 8, and I circled your name right away because you've been very generous, not just to me but to the community. So yeah, that was you definitely. It was a good thing you were there. I know it's tough, and there's probably other people on this call that might have some hurt feelings, and I get it. Totally get it.
What do you do?
Yeah, what do you do? Yeah, you can't win.
Yeah, but you wish you wanted to bring them all, but I appreciate it, and appreciate what you did for this tasting. So yeah, Andre, carps off, buddy.
Thank you very much, James. Super appreciated.
You're welcome.
Should we wake Adam up now, or do we let Adam sleep a bit more?
And if anyone does want to rant at me that they didn't get to try them,
I'll sleep a bit.
Holy shit!
That's how I usually end up, Adam. Not always start.
Shit, he is asleep.
Just resting up for the aftershow.
He heard the rumors.
Alrighty, well, I will go ahead and stop recording here, but again, thank you, James, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, buddy.